going to have our second show called Let's Make Lunch. And today's lunch is one of my favorite comfort food lunches. So we are making grilled cheese sandwiches and homemade tomato soup. It is the easiest tomato soup ever. You're going to love it. So let's just kind of first go over the tools and the ingredients that we're going to need for both of these things, and then we're going to get the soup started. So for the soup, what I've got are I've got two small cans of diced tomatoes. You can use any kind of tomatoes. If they're whole tomatoes or diced, it doesn't matter. They're going to get blended anyway. But you want about 28 ounces of tomatoes. This time of year, you may be able to find some really good ripe tomatoes since it's, harvest time. If you're going to use fresh tomatoes, you want to make sure that you use about 2 pounds of fresh tomatoes. You can peel them if you'd like, but it's not necessary since they will be blended later. I've also got a small can of chicken broth. You want about 1.5 to 2 cups of either water or some sort of broth or stock. I'm using chicken broth at this point because that's what I had, and it makes it a little bit tastier, just gives it a little bit more flavor. I've also got 4 tablespoons of butter, and I like to cut my butter up a little bit just so it melts a little bit better. I've got a half an onion, roughly chopped. Since it's going to be blended later, we don't really need to chop it very finely. I also have some fresh basil from my garden, which we're going to add at the end of cooking, just to add a little deliciousness. I love fresh basil in my soup, my tomato soup. Also, as far as tools go, we're going to need a pan that we're going to make our soup in, cook our soup in, and we're also going to need some sort of blender. So if you have a blender on your countertop that you want to use to blend this, absolutely fine. You just want to be careful if you're using a regular blender, because when you're blending hot soup, you don't obviously want that hot soup to get out of your blender. So you want to put your hand on top of the blender with a towel. Like, put a towel down and put your hand on it and then blend your soup. I am going to be using a stick blender or an immersion blender. You can blend this right in the pan, so there's no transferring. I really like these. It's one of my favorite tools. I use it all the time. So that's what we need for the tomato soup. And then for the grilled cheese, you're going to need some sort of bread. I've got sourdough bread, but you could use rye, you could use white bread, wheat bread, any kind of bread you like, really. As long as it's not crusty on the outside. You don't want the end pieces because they don't brown very well. Obviously, you're going to need cheese for grilled cheese. Because we live in Wisconsin, we have a great variety of cheese right at our fingertips. Today, we're going to be using a Chipotle Gouda cheese for the one grilled cheese. And for the other grilled cheese, I've got a mango habanero, which is very spicy, which is what I like. And we have butter to spread on the bread. And we're also going to be adding ham to one of our sandwiches. You can add ham, turkey, beef, anything you'd like, really. You can add some vegetables if you like caramelized onions. You could put that in your sandwich. Really, the sky's the limit with grilled cheese. So whatever kinds of things you like and experiment with. It's great to experiment. The tomato soup, we're going to kind of leave it, pretty much at the same way that the recipe has it, because if you get too far, you put too much stuff in tomato soup, it's no longer tomato soup, it's something else. So we're going to get started on our tomato soup. I've got my pan on over on the stove, and it's about medium heat right now. And I am going to add my 4 tablespoons of butter. You can hear that sizzling a little bit. Once that's heated up a little, we are going to add our onion. Just right in the pan. There we go. And then I'll let that onion soften just a little bit in the butter. Oh wow, that smells really delicious. So the onion will just soften up a little bit in the hot butter. Mmm, smells delicious in here. All right, we're going to add all of the 2 cans of tomatoes. Juice and everything. No need to drain it. And we're going to add our chicken broth. All of that. I'm going to give that just a little bit of a stir. All right. That is all we need to do. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit to about a 3. And that's all we're going to need to do for right now. We're going to let that cook, kind of just simmer away on our stovetop for 40 minutes. We're going to let that onion really soften and get really nice and soft and yummy and sweet. And then we'll be blending that once the 40 minutes is up. We're going to be working a little bit on our grilled cheese next while our tomato soup cooks, and we'll be checking on that as we go. So our soup has been started and we're waiting for that. So while we're waiting for that, we're going to talk about our grilled cheese, and we're actually going to start making our grilled cheese sandwiches, which is going to smell really, really good. So grilled cheese is kind of got an interesting history. There was no mention of the actual words grilled cheese or grilled cheese sandwich up until 1960. That was the first time it was ever written in print that anybody could find. So basically, bread didn't always come sliced. So back in the 1920s, a gentleman developed a bread slicer, commercial bread slicer, and so people were able to access commercially made sliced bread in the stores. So once they had that, they were able to put different things, toppings and things on that bread. And then in the 1940s, Kraft Company in the United States developed processed cheese. And processed cheese melts really nicely and it's gooey and lovely. And so people started putting that on to their bread and grilling it. People, in fact, in the Navy. So during World War II, on the U.S. naval ships, that was one of their big meals. They would have grilled, well, they called it toasted cheese. Or no, they actually called it, what was the name of it? I have to get it right. They called it American cheese filling sandwiches. So basically it was just one slice of bread with some processed cheese grated on top, and then it was grilled. And that's what the sailors would eat on the ships during World War II. So after the war, they took that recipe back with them to their homes. And so people were making that at home, open-faced grilled cheese sandwiches. And then Kraft came up with American cheese singles. So when they came up with those, that's when people started putting the top on the grilled cheese sandwich and you know, basically making what we know now as the grilled cheese sandwich in the United States. So a little history there on the wonderful grilled cheese sandwich. I lived in Britain for a little while. I went to school over there. And in Britain, especially kids and college people, really, really enjoy something called a cheese toastie, which is basically a grilled cheese sandwich, but they call it a cheese toastie. And they put all kinds of really delicious fillings in their cheese toasties. And I had something very similar to this machine in my dorm room. And basically, it's an all-in-one grilled cheese maker. So this plugs in and it heats up, and there's a light that comes on when it's ready, when it's hot. And what you do is you put your buttered slice of bread face down, put your fillings in, put another buttered side face up, and then you close this, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, until it gets really nice and crusty on the outside and gooey and delicious on the inside. And then you have a cheese toastie. And what I like about this is that it actually cuts your sandwich in half into triangles, which is fun. All right, we're not going to use that today because our bread is not the right shape. So we're going to just use our sourdough bread that we have here. So the first step in making your grilled cheese is going to be to butter your slices of bread. So you want to make sure you get it nice and buttered all the way to the edges. You don't want it to leave any spaces unbuttered. I don't know about you, but I love a grilled cheese sandwich, and I always have. So we're just gonna butter these. All right, so I've got the bread buttered, and we are ready to assemble our sandwiches. So we're gonna step over to the stove. I've got it on about a medium heat, and it is starting to get a little hot. So we're gonna put our bread, 2 slices of bread, since we're doing 2 sandwiches, face down, so butter side down on the hot pan, just like so. And then we're going to, so one of these sandwiches is just cheese. So we're just going to put the cheese right on top. Make sure it's pretty even. You don't want cheese to be too thick on one side. So yeah, we're just gonna put our cheese for our cheese only sandwich right on our bread in the pan. I like to do it in the pan. Just minimizes the mess a little bit. And then we're going to put our second slice of bread so the butter is facing up. So the second sandwich, because we have ham in the middle, we're going to use about half of our cheese on the bottom slice of bread. And the cheese is going to kind of bind those two things together, to 2 pieces of bread together. It's going to be like cheesy glue. Better thing than cheesy glue. So we're going to put half the cheese down. Then we're going to add our ham. And then we will finish with the other half of the cheese. Our cheesy glue. Oh my goodness, there's cheese everywhere. It's escaping. All right, so we've got more cheese on the top of our ham. And we're gonna need to put the lid on this sandwich as well. Butter side up. And I like to just press them down a little bit till they start kind of getting cooked a little. And it's going to take a few minutes, but you can hear them starting to sizzle right now. So our sandwiches have been cooking for a little while now, a few minutes, and I like to just kind of check them a little bit. You can just lift it up a little and see if it's brown enough for you. I like mine pretty brown, but that looks pretty good. So I am going to flip my sandwich. So this is the tricky part, especially when there's 2 in there. All right, here we go. Ready? Let's get you in the pan. Oops. I'm destroying the second one, but that's okay. All right, now we're gonna flip the second one. Oops. That's it. All right, and I like to press them down a little bit. It flattens them a little bit, but I find that it makes it kind of more crunchy. And an interesting note, I was just, while I was looking at these, it reminded me of the Italian version of a grilled cheese sandwich, which are called paninis. And paninis are very similar, but they use a panini press. So they put their bread in this press, they put the sandwich, they put all of the fillings into the sandwich, and then they press it in this hot iron on both sides, and it squishes the bread, and it heats everything all the way through and makes it nice and crispy. And it's a little bit flatter than a regular grilled cheese, but they are very, very good. We went to a place in Florence that is famous for their paninis, and it was the tiniest little place. You could only have like 10 people in there at a time. And you just went through the line and told them what kind of meat, what kind of cheese, and what kind of fillings you wanted, toppings. Like they had peppers and olives and things like that. And then they just put it together for you, and out you went with your sandwich. They were very good. So we are almost there. All right. Not quite as brown as I would like on the other side, so we're just going to leave that for a minute. Press it down a little bit more. So our soup is still cooking on the stove. It's got a few more minutes to go, but I just wanted to show you a technique of cutting. So I'm going to add fresh basil from my garden to my soup. Tomato basil soup is delicious. If you enjoy basil, yes, do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a technique called chiffonade, and it's a way of cutting basil and some of the other herbs that is really easy, and it's really pretty, and it's not going to matter too much because we're actually going to blend it, but I just want to show you this. So what we're going to do is we stack up all of our basil leaves. See, we've got a nice stack of them, and what I'm going to do is roll them pretty tightly into a nice little basil leaf roll, okay? And then we're going to take our knife and make sure you get your fingers tucked under. And what you're going to do is just let the knife get all the way through that. And then you're going to move it over to the next little spot. And we're just going to cut about 1/4 inch, maybe a little less than that. So this is called chiffonade. And it makes just lovely little strips of basil or whatever other kind of flat leaf that you're cutting. You could certainly do this with spinach if you wanted a very pretty spinach. So this is what the chiffonade of basil will look like. And we're going to add that to our soup. I might actually add that after it's blended just because it's just so pretty. All right. Okay, so our soup has been cooking on the stovetop. It's bubbling away right here. You can see it bubbling. You can see the butter is kind of floating on the top. And butter in this recipe is what adds the richness to this soup. So it's finished cooking. We're going to make sure we turn off our heat. And then we're just going to move it off the heat source. Okay, so it just kind of starts to cool down a little bit. I've got my stick blender. If you were going to use a regular blender at this point, you would spoon it into your blender. Make sure you put a towel on top of your blender and then hold that on the lid while you blend it, just for safety. This will splash a little bit, and it is still very hot, so I want to be careful, but it should mostly stay in the pan as long as I keep it under. So we're just going to blend that up until it's mostly blended. So we've blended our soup, and this looks pretty good. There might be a few chunks here and there, but I don't worry about that too much. If you want it really super smooth, you could keep blending it. That wouldn't be a problem either. So we're just going to leave it right here on the stovetop for a second. And we're going to want to grab a tasting spoon. So you want to, it's pretty hot yet. It just did come off the heat. So you just want to take a little taste. Make sure it's cool enough. A little taste of it. Ooh, that is really good. Most soup you want to add a little bit of salt to. It just kind of brings out the flavors a little bit. So we're just going to add a couple of pinches of salt. We're going to stir that in. Look at that. It almost looks creamy, and that is the butter that was in there. I'm going to grab one more spoon here quick. Give it another taste. Make sure that salt did its job. Perfect. That is some delicious tomato soup. And we're going to take that basil that we cut up earlier. And we're going to add that right into the soup. Sprinkle it right in. Oh, isn't that pretty? And the heat from the soup will heat up the basil and it will make it smell delicious. So we're going to stir that right in. And our soup is ready. All right, I think the big moment is finally here. We are ready. So we are going to turn our oven off, our stovetop off, and then we're going to just lift our sandwiches right out of the pan very carefully. And I'm going to move the pan off the heat so it stops cooking. All right. Then we're going to take our beautiful sandwiches to our counter, and I'm going to cut them up. All right. I like to cut them into kind of strips. So this is the ham and cheese. Look at that. Ooh. So looks really good. So we're going to put that onto our plate. And you can see our tomato soup next to it, looking absolutely delicious. And then we're going to cut up the cheese, plain cheese sandwich. Let's have a look at that. Oh, cheesy. It's so melty. And that is lunch or dinner or snack time all finished. So I am very much looking forward to enjoying a nice grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of our homemade tomato soup. And that tomato soup, honestly, is just as good as anything you can get in a can, and it's very, very tasty. I think you will enjoy it. Please let me know if you do. So we will see you next time for another Let's Make Lunch.